Greetings. Once again, it's your host, Gabe Morales with Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm very happy to have her on the show. We have Dr. Felecia Nace, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what she does as far as in the field of education. And as many of you know, I ran a true crime series, and we talked about Wayne Williams in Atlanta and the Atlanta child murders. So we have a lot of things to talk about. How are you this morning?
I am doing really well. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing okay here in Hawaii. Not really a bad day in Hawaii, but thank you.
Well, I mean, not a bad place to be, that's for sure.
So, Dr. Nace, can I call you Dr. Nace or should I call you Felecia?
You can call me Felecia, that's fine.
Okay, okay. So we'll from here on out, we'll address you as Felecia. Where were you born and where were you raised?
So I was born in Newark, New Jersey, which is better known as Brick City. And it's a very diverse and eclectic place. We had communities such as the Italian section of Newark, which is the North Ward of Newark. Newark is divided into these sections: North, East, West, South. And just to give you an idea of how eclectic and how diverse it was, we have had famous people like Jerry Lewis, who came out of, I don't know if you know Jerry Lewis, I don't know how old your audience is, but I am an old movie buff. And so Jerry Lewis came out of the South Side of Newark. We also have Whitney Houston, who hails from Newark. Shaq, the famous ball player, hails from Newark. And me, of course.
Right.
And even in the 1800s, there was a Stephen Crane who wrote Red Badge of Courage. He hails from Newark as well. So we have all these creative people who came out of the city, Newark, New Jersey. It also has a large African American population. Many of those individuals migrated from south to north during the 50s and 60s to escape poverty and to have better opportunities, not only for themselves, but for their children as well. And I am a product of that because my parents were a part of that great migration from south to north. And they landed in Newark. And that's where I was born. So it's a great city. It's 15 minutes from Manhattan. So I got a chance to really indulge in a lot of cultural activities growing up in that area. It was a great place to grow up to get a start.
Very good. So you went to school then in Newark schools?
I went to school in Newark, New Jersey. And it was, like I said, it was a great opportunity because there were such diverse communities all around me. And I got a chance to engage with them. So, yeah, so I did go to school there.
And then what did you do after high school?
So after high school, I went straight to college. My parents were adamant that all of us were going to be college bound. And we were, all except for one of my brothers who passed away, but he probably made more money than all of us put together. He decided, I don't need college. I'm just going to go straight into business. But I did end up going to college. It was something that, like I said, my parents were adamant about. Directly after college, though, I took a year off and decided to take a chance at modeling full time. So I ended up going to Milan, which was a great experience. And I'm glad that I took that year off before going into education, which was my major in college.
Gotcha. Well, yes, that must have
Yeah.
been quite an experience. Milan, Italy?
Milan, Italy. Yes.
Right. Wow, I'm
Yes.
jealous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a kid coming from Newark and not really being exposed to any extensive travel. It was my first time outside of the United States, and I traveled alone. I just got on the plane and decided I'm going to take a chance at modeling. I had read an article in the Village Voice newspaper that said if you're an aspiring model or if you are a hair designer, it literally said, get your butt to Milan.
All right.
Because it was then at that time up and coming. And people were asking me, why aren't you going to Paris? And I said, no, Milan's going to be the next hottest place, according to the Village Voice. So that's where I'm going.
Great.
Yeah.
And so then after you went to college and you got your major in education, if I understand correctly,
Yes. Yes. My bachelorette degree was in education.
got you. And that be in higher education or early education?
Once I graduated, I was certified. At that time, you could get a certification K through 8, and so that was my certification in the state of New Jersey.
Excellent, excellent. And so then what were some of the facilities you worked at and some of the assignments you had?
So, in terms of the work I did, I started off in Catholic school. That was the only job I could get at the time. Teaching jobs were very competitive in the public school district at that time. So I got my start there in private school. And then after about 3 years, I ended up landing a job in the Newark Public School District. That was my very first public school teaching position. And then from there, I went on to Virginia. I taught in Virginia, in the state of Virginia. Also taught in different places in New Jersey, like Montclair, New Jersey, as well as Maplewood, New Jersey. So I kind of, got a nice feel for different types of children. In Virginia, I taught in an area that could be considered rural. So I got that experience. I actually taught in Upper Montclair, which was a very affluent area. And so I got to see all these different and work with all these different types of children who came from different economic backgrounds. So, but not only that, then after that, I decided I wanted to work on my doctorate degree. And as part of my doctorate studies, I ended up going to Japan, living in West Tokyo for a year and teaching at Tamagawa University. I taught English to children during the day and then adults in the evening because they had a private school for children on campus. And so I did that, which was very interesting work. Came back to the United States after a year and started working for the New Jersey Department of Education in New Jersey. So I did that for 13 years as an education specialist. I also served on a board at a local college in New Jersey, Raritan Valley Community College, for a couple of years. So I was a board trustee as well, and taught in a community college for 5 years as well.
Excellent.
So yes, I wore a couple of different hats.
Right on. So, Felecia, before we came on the air, we had talked about the importance of early childhood development. And even in the womb, in my classes, I've always emphasized the importance of education because I have worked mostly in the criminal justice system. I find this very shocking. Don't quote me on this, but these are some of the stats that I've heard, and I believe it. It costs between $20,000 to $40,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. However, we only spend in the United States, I have heard, between $6,000 to $10,000 per student. In other words, we spend about 1/4 of the money on a child's education versus an adult's incarceration. To me, I find something seriously wrong with that. I know you can relate to that as far as the importance of education in our society.
Absolutely, I can. This is the reason why, one of the reasons why I do what I do in terms of writing about education. I like to educate the average Joe about what's happening to our school systems. They are crumbling. And you're right, we only spend drop in the bucket on education, which is the most important cornerstone of our society. I mean, these are going to be our next doctors, lawyers, police officers, teachers. And we really need to start investing more in our children. One of the things I'm really upset about is that we only have a certain number of hours in a day. And because I have had boots on the ground, I know how precious those hours are. What really sticks in my craw right now is the fact that we're trying to dump all of these social issues into our curriculums. We don't have time in the day. Our kids are struggling just to read, which is, if you look at the correlation between failing students and those who land in prison, a lot of these kids didn't do well in school. They can't read and write well. They can't, do simple math, a lot of them. That's why a lot of them end up in jail. There are no critical thinking skills that have been developed in these individuals. So what do? They turn to crime. They turn to something that's easy. They turn to something that they turn to gangs, people who are going to embrace the fact they may not be scholarly or they may not have the skill sets that they need to survive otherwise in this world. So we are creating an underbelly of young people who are going to end up in prison. Yeah, and that's the fact. So your numbers are spot on, and it's very unfortunate.
I totally understand. So we're both on the same page there. And so I understand you have some expertise with the Wayne Williams case. You were referred to me by one of your colleagues, and I thank him for that. He came on the show, and he said that I should talk to you about that case and about education, some of the other things we're talking about here today. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was like during that time frame of the Wayne Williams case, because I have been on the internet and saw a lot of shows on TV about that case. There's still a lot of controversy, even though it happened many years ago. What's your opinion and your experience with the Atlanta child murders case?
Well, this is how I got involved in the Atlanta child murders case. I was not there in the late 70s, early 80s when all this was taking place. I was a mere child. But John worked the case. John actually was the lead forensic psychiatrist on the case. And he was involved in so many other cases like Ted Bundy case and other really popular cases. So much so that he never got the chance to write this book that he had been wanting to write for years, which is about the anti-child murder case. And he and I connected on social media, and we found that we had some places where we could actually cross-pollinate. And he asked me to come on board with this book, which I was so fortunate to be asked to come on to this book. And I said yes. I said absolutely. And so I write about a lot of the educational aspects, which is a backdrop to poverty. Many of the kids who were murdered were entrenched in poverty. They came from single parent family homes, very impoverished areas of Atlanta. And so they were made vulnerable by that poverty to someone such as Wayne Williams, who ended up being the killer. You know, Wayne Williams came from an educated family, whereas these children didn't. And he was able to prey on that. And that's how he was able to lure a lot of the children in by offering them contracts in rapping or careers in rapping where they could become rich, something that poor kids dream about. And that was one of the ways that he was able to pull them in. Predators, they go after the weakest of, especially when we talk about children, people who are predators and who manipulate children, they go after the weakest of children. And so what are we doing in education? We are creating massive amounts of weak children, because instead of concentrating on reading, writing, arithmetic, we are now talking about and doing it, actually implementing LGBTQ plus curriculums to children who literally can't spell the word lesbian. They can't spell the word transgender. And then we want to add on top of that, another layer is to talk about equity to kids who really don't know what basic reading material, they can't comprehend basic reading material. And so how do we then put something like equity in front of them, a very complex concept that they can't possibly understand, a lot of them? The test scores in 2019, the year prior to the pandemic, the national reading scores for fourth graders, only 45% of them were able to read on grade level. That's nationally. We were in a bad place. And then COVID happened, and you can only imagine where those scores are today. And the average American does not know what their local test scores are. Every American should know, because we're all paying taxes, for these failing school districts, but the average person does not know what the reading scores and math scores are in their community. We've got to start turning our attention back toward the school district and what's happening there, and start attending those board meetings, because we don't get our money back simply because your kids are grown and out of the house. You don't then start getting money back from your city or your state, right? Because your kids no longer attend that school. We are still supporting our public school districts. And so we do need to be at those board meetings and let them know that we are very much involved and very much in control.
So what I hear you saying then, Felecia, is not only do we have funding issues, we need to make sure that our education systems are funded well, and that we have well-trained teachers to deal with these students. We have to teach the basic fundamentals first, and then the critical thinking skills, and then maybe some of this extra stuff that people are throwing in at kindergarten, first grade. These kids, they're not even developed mentally yet to even grasp a lot of these concepts. It's not to say that that isn't something that they shouldn't think about and learn about later, but it sounds to me like first we're skipping the basic fundamentals, and then we wonder why we lose them along the way, and they have already dropped out and can't even fill out an application because they've dropped out in middle school already and they entered the criminal justice system and have a criminal record. Now nobody wants to hire them, and it just becomes a snowball effect. Is that correct?
Cyclical. Yep. cyclical. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you really put everything in perspective. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about, let's do first things first. Learning is a build, these are building blocks for children. And if you don't have the fundamentals in place, how can you begin to even talk about equity? And this is where equity begins, equal footing for our children. Let's equalize the playing field first before we start talking about, deep subjects such as equity and diversity. Can we get kids to be able to spell the word diversity first? I mean,
Right.
so now you look at where these kids were in Atlanta 40 plus years ago, steeped in poverty, parents who were not well educated, and you fast forward to 2023, and what do we have? We have larger pockets of the same in Newark, in Houston, in Chicago, and then in our rural areas in America. So it crosses color lines. We like to say that poverty is just for brown people, but that's not the case. I mean, reality is it's an equal opportunist. So what I think we need to do is to start build good reading, writing, arithmetic skills first, and then build on that. And like you said, that's what college is for. If you want to take an elective, like I took an elective, I think, in women's studies when I was in college. I needed to, this extra credit. And that was a great place for that topic. I wasn't ready to delve into women's studies. I was a girl in grammar school and high school. So that was a topic or a subject that should not have been presented to me at a younger age. It was something that I wanted to or was interested in pursuing. I could do it in college. So right, there's a time and place for everything in education. We have to start being smart about what's really driving these changes in education, because they serve no purpose in terms of creating kids who are intelligent and who are ready for the world and who are ready to confront predators in our culture of all types.
Well, thank you for talking about that. I know it's a difficult topic. A lot of people don't want to talk about these things, but we need to. We need to make choices, I guess. We can't, you said the funds are very limited already. We can't cover
Yes.
everything. Some of those things are probably the role of the parents to teach. I know you have written some books. Let's talk a little bit about your books. What are some of the books you've written about this?
Well, the first book that I wrote is called Massaging the Mindset. That's the short title. And that one I wrote for school principals and superintendents about how to create effective change in our school districts. And if you have a business, I think anyone who has a business can also find some value in that book as well, because I talk about the fact that you can have teachers who have boots on the ground, and a lot of times the changes will stem from the leadership in an organization such as a school. However, the leadership doesn't always listen to those who have boots on the ground and who are actually working with clients, and in case of schools who are working with students. And so some of the things that are being implemented in curriculums today, no one bothers to ask the teachers, how do you think this will roll out? How do you think this will affect students? So what's being rolled out in school districts is not always the best for children, because there is very little teacher input. And these are the people who are on the front line. These are the people who interface with children every day. So the book does cover that we can often make the mistakes in an organization to just ask staff to implement changes without first engaging them, saying, what do you think about this change? And the second book I wrote is called Top Down Confusion: Is Gray the New Pink in Education? And that one touches on all the social justice lessons that we see to the curriculum today. I wrote that book because there was just too much talk about social justice lessons. And at the same time, I was working at the New Jersey Department of Education. And I got to see firsthand, you get that aerial view when you work for the state, because you get to tap into all of the data from different school districts, not just one school. Like when I was a teacher, my focus was just in that classroom. But working for the New Jersey Department of Education, I got to see the data from all the school districts. So I kept thinking, why do these topics of social justice keep coming up? And we're going back to like 2015, 16, 17, when I started to write that book. And I'm thinking, why are these topics coming up when we have such dire need for basic education in our classrooms across the state? Everybody knew that some of the scores were just glaringly low, but yet this was a topic of conversation. So that book was born out of me just questioning, where are we headed in education? And here we are in 2023, and that book still has value.
So those are two books. You have more, correct?
Yeah, I have one more, and that's the Atlanta Child Murders, their message today about education, politics, and race relations. And that's the most recent book. That one was produced last year. All three books were published by Rowman and Littlefield. And that book I co-authored with Dr. John Lieber. He was the lead forensic psychiatrist on that case. And I come in and just kind of update the case with what's happening politically now, and I connect it back to 40 years ago.
I really was interested when he said, you need to speak to this lady. She's very intelligent. She knows a lot about education. And I was like, yeah, well, we already kind of talked about some of these mass murders. Let's talk about some of the underlying issues maybe that contribute to dysfunctional individuals in our society, whether it be mass murders, whether it be gang members, drug addicts, so on and so forth. It's all relevant, I believe. You've accomplished a lot of things, Felecia. What would you say are a couple of your highest accomplishments, greatest accomplishments?
I'd have to say that one of my greatest accomplishments has been to stand up for parents who are fighting the good fight and trying to keep the curriculums clean, trying to get their kids through public school districts without their kids being tainted, their kids still having their innocence intact. And just standing with them arm in arm and standing up for them. And in many cases, I have lost a lot in doing that, but I've gained so much more. The government is taking over our children, and this is the time to stand. So that's what I encourage people to do. And I have been very proud to stand with those parents who have tried to push back against these agendas.
What would you say, Felecia, were some of your greatest hurdles doing some of the work that you do?
Oh, one of my greatest hurdles, and I like to talk about my broccoli and mayonnaise story. One of my greatest hurdles was affording to get through college. I remember working on my master's degree and giving up half of my paycheck. That was the arrangement I made with the college in order to get through that part of my education. And I was working in Virginia at the time, and my pay was extremely low. I don't know what it's like now, what the pay scale is now, but it was extremely low at the time. And they would take a paycheck. Like I would have to, my groceries, my rent, everything out of one paycheck, and literally give them the second paycheck to pay for college. But those are the sacrifices that we make. One of the things that I think we do as adults or don't tell the younger generation all the struggles that we endured. What we do is we show up pressed. They see us looking very polished, and they just think that we arrived at that place. And I think we should share those stories more. So I call it my broccoli and mayonnaise story. I came home one day, I looked in the refrigerator, and all I had after a long, hard day of teaching was broccoli and mayonnaise for dinner. I ate it in tears, but I look back on that story and I cherish it because I sacrificed something for a greater good. And I'm glad that my degree afforded me an opportunity to have a voice for parents today. I hope that we, moving forward, can create young people who are strong, who have that kind of strength to endure something in life. I mean, today we have young people who are body shamed and hair shamed. And my goodness, where is our strong America, our strong youth in this country, who are able to endure some things? So I endured a lot of things like that along the way in order to get my degrees. And I wear it with a badge of honor.
Well, very good. Well, you certainly earned your doctor's degree, Dr. Nace, and I'm glad to have met you as an educator and also as a person. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
For having me.
Keeping up with you and reading some of your books.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And by the way, thank you for doing what you do, because a topic like this, you don't see this on MSNBC. You're not going to see it on CNN. They're not talking about the important topics.
Well, thank you for putting that, everything in perspective. And once again, about the importance of education in our society. So we're going to show Dr. Nace's books right here. If you want to get a hold of her, put up her contacts too, and also the books and how you can get a hold of those if you want to learn more about this subject. Aloha from Hawaii.
Thank you. Bye.